My name is Cecile Johnson. I'm CEO of African Development Plan, and I'm here today as part of Global City Unity's community outreach to keep you informed about issues affecting the global Black community that require us to be unified and be on one accord to find solutions. So today we're going to welcome my guests, who is Dr. Gale Frazier, Yusufu Moseley, and Justina Winfrey. All are activists in the Black community here in Chicago, and we're going to be focusing on following up on some of the data that I gave to you the last time that we spoke. And this is on the Human Development Index, so today's session is going to be focused on the issue impacting life expectancy in the Black community. So, Dr. Frazier, I'd like to welcome you. Could you give us a little background on yourself?
Thank you so much for having me on. Again, my name is Dr. Gale Frazier, and I am a community activist in addition to an educator, an entrepreneur, and an ordained minister, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yusufu?
Yes, my name is Yusufu Moseley, longtime community activist since the 60s, working with a department called Restorative Justice, and I'll explain that as we go on. And thank you for inviting me as well.
Justina?
My name is Justina Winfrey, and I am founder of Computer Advancement and Bilingual Education, GABE, located in the Austin community on the west side of Chicago. My particular focus is parent empowerment and community empowerment.
Welcome. You will see later why these three distinguished guests have been invited. They have been working with me for a number of years on issues as it impacts the community, and they really are quite knowledgeable. Not only are they knowledgeable about what is happening, but they're also very innovative in their approach to solutions. So last time when I was on, we talked about the Human Development Index. That in the past, when we talked about how people were doing, we looked at the economy, but that the new way of actually doing that was saying, how are the people doing? And then I began to give you some information on the data as it impacted Black people. And so what we're going to do is just a minor recap so we can then segue into talking to our experts on some solutions. We noted that from 2007 to 2012 in the Black community that Black life had actually decreased for Black men by 2.3 years, right? They had gone from 70 years in 2007 to 67.66 years. And that not only had they dropped 2.33 years, but there was a big gap of 7 years between a white man's life and a Black man's life. When we talked about Black women, we saw that there had been a decrease of 2 years, from 3 years from 2007 to 2012, where they had gone from 76.8 years to 73.59 years. And we also talked about what causes that impact. Depending on where you live in Chicago, you can actually have a difference of 14 years between Black and white. And that deals with the income of the area that you're living in. Because if you're really poor or you're middle class, there's going to be a difference in how you have access to food, the crime, all of these things. Right? So where you live does impact what happens to you, and in Chicago, which is still a very segregated city, that impacts Black people in a very huge way. Now, one of the things we talked about was that in the state of Illinois, poverty rate is 14%. But when you looked at the Black community, it was 31%. And then you came into many of our inner city communities. You had North Lawndale at 45.3%. Inglewood at 47.8% poverty rate, and Riverdale at 58.3%. Now, I know that this number is astounding to some of you, and it should be, because just imagine what life is like when you have such a high concentration of poverty in one specific area. So what was the impact of that on this life expectancy that we've seen drop, right? You have infant mortality. So whereas 5 white babies die per 1,000, you have 14 Black babies die per 1,000. When you look at maternal mortality in the city of Chicago, you find that 27 Black women died in the period 2000 to 2004, and you saw 1 white woman. So there's definitely a difference. So those of us who want to say, it has nothing to do with race, well, the data speaks for itself. There is an issue, and the issue is along racial lines, and we live in a country where we spend 17% of our GDP on health. So tell me, why is there such a discrepancy? Okay? Communities that have no or distant grocery stores or have an imbalance or health food options will likely have increased premature death and chronic health conditions. We know in the Black community we have an issue with access to groceries. And it's not just poverty rates, right? Then we had another thing happen to us where we had reverse redlining. We had people who were steering minority neighborhoods into high-cost mortgages, and so we have seen a flood of foreclosures. All of these things are stressful, right, on a black life. And so we see in Chicago where you will have 83% of the homeless are black, right? So there's been a tremendous disconnect. The white population has a 3.5% homeless rate. So when the economy goes down, there are some people who've lost their homes, but it didn't happen like it happened for us because we already had so many other social things happening to us as a people. Now, one more thing we add to that is causing the decrease in our birth and in our death, our life expectancy, is the issue of violence, right? As of today, we have had 1,007 people shot and wounded in Chicago, right? Total shot 1185, and of that 206 were homicides. So this is, black people are when it comes to who are being affected, 76.6% of the people who die are black, and 71% of those who commit the crime to kill them are black. So guess what? This is a black issue, right? So when some of our guests today are going to be speaking, we're speaking because we are black. This is a black issue, and we feel that the solutions need to come from our community. Another thing we need to talk about is the cost of what this website called Hey Jackass says, the cost of our stupidity, right? There is a tremendous amount of money being spent when people get shot, then they have to have, they go to the ER and the hospital expenses, and then if they die, they have the homicide costs and all of this. All of this adds up to about $2.5 billion. $2.5 billion, right? Now, in our communities, you know what we could do with $2.5 billion? Quite a lot. So we are trying to be out-of-the-box thinkers in how we are approaching some of this. Chicago, some of our aldermen want to talk about spike and how you know, it's negative to call it Chirac. Guess what? I live in Chirac, right? And that's what Chicago is, because these kind of deaths are unconscionable. And it's unconscionable because in our black community, we need to check this. We need to check this, right? But we also know that we elected a mayor and we elected aldermen, and we expect political support and we expect the resources that are going to handle some of this. When it comes to killing by police in the state of Illinois, 508 people nationwide have been killed by the police, and 11 in Illinois, and of the 11, 5 were black, right? So we're only 15% of the Illinois population, but we are 50% of those killed by the police. When you look at the asthma and lead, we already showed that we had a very high incidence of lead prevalence. Why? Because we poor, we live in old homes have lead-based paint, etc., right? So it's just a compounding of poverty. It just creates more and more and more issues that impact us. In our neighborhoods in Chicago, 12 Chicago communities are equivalent to third world countries, right? Ashburn, Auburn Gresham, Austin, Brighton Park, Chatham, Cage Park, Hermosa, Rogers Park, Montclair, Mount Greenwood, Roseland, and West Inglewood, right? So what does that mean, right? That they have less doctors than other communities. Now, we already know on the south side, when you have someone get shot, they can't even go to the University of Chicago. So, you know, again, where you live, right, going to add or take off years off of your life, especially when you live in a segregated city like Chicago. So the questions, I did that to kind of lead up to panels, life expectancy and long and healthy death, right? Based on the grim data that we have just kind of shared with some of the people, what are some of the things that community members can do to address these problems?
Well, I know I would say from my end, of course, it's always important for us to educate the community. You know, of course, being a part of the National Black Agenda Consortium, where I serve as chair, that is something that's always been a key component. Our mantra is to educate, organize, and mobilize. With the statistical data that you just provided, it's quite obvious that the community is not aware of that. So I would definitely say that's one key thing, that we have to get this information out so that the people will clearly know that we have a serious pandemic when it comes to violence and health care and all of those things. So that would certainly be something I would say that we would have to do.
Okay, Yusufu?
Yes, I would like to say that it's threefold, and it begins with a speech that Minister Malcolm X gave. He said we have to do three things no matter what else we do in the black community. We have to wake up, we have to clean up, and we have to stand up. By wake up, he means come into consciousness.
Right.
coming to knowing who you are, who the enemy is, and what your situation is, truly, not the illusionary stuff. Then you say clean up all those bad habits that we've obtained over the generations that we've been in this country and been involved with these people. And then the last thing is to stand up for the community and do the things that will help liberate us from those evils and ills that you talked about.
Awesome. And Justina?
We have to begin to understand the state of our communities and allow interaction with those who have vested interest in the community, the people, the constituents, those who live in the community. They have to be at the table for planning. We have to begin to educate them so that they understand the process of organizing and planning. But it starts with education. It's not a matter of just inviting them out to an event. We have to train them and mentor them through the process. We cannot expect dilapidated communities that struggle with resources, organizations that have the funding to offer the resources to those constituents, but unfortunately our people do not hold these folks accountable. We have to begin to teach them how to do that. Just that simple. And once they understand their power, their voice, their vote, truly we'll see a difference. But first we have to educate them on how to organize.
Okay. So do you think we need to have a comprehensive Black agenda work plan, and why would you think so?
Oh, most definitely we need a comprehensive Black agenda, because a comprehensive plan is holistic in nature, which means that would encompass everything pertaining to education, healthcare, criminal justice, criminal code reform, all of the things that impact us as African Americans. Is very critical for us to have something that's complete. And as Justina said, we want to bring the people who have a vested interest into the whole program so that we can make sure that all of the results that we need will be impactful. When we have other people doing things for us and making decisions for us, then we won't get what we need out of the program.
And Dr. Frazier, could you tell us a little bit about how the Black agenda tried to address that in the last election cycle?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question. We came together as a National Black Agenda, and we worked together with several other organizations. Out of it came the Coalition of Black Community Organizations. Ms. Justina Winfrey is also a part of that. And what happened is that we comprised coming together with community experts, and not just community experts, people of goodwill and good faith. We came together and created a municipal candidates questionnaire, which addressed everything pertaining to African Americans in the city of Chicago, as it pertains to reparations, because we put that in there, education, housing, all of those things. And what transpired is that it was disseminated to all of the candidates who are running for office, including the mayor. And we had quite a few aldermanic contenders. They responded, but unfortunately the mayor that we have now did not respond to that questionnaire. But it did address issues that pertain to us.
So Yusufu, following up on that, do you think we need to have a comprehensive Black agenda work plan, and why?
Yes, and we definitely need an agenda that speaks specifically to our interests and our concerns.
Yes.
If we don't have one, we will be subject to the things that we see now.
Yeah.
Why do we need one? Because we're distinct people with a distinct history and a distinct culture that needs to be maximized and not used as tools by folks who want to, maximize their own interests.
Exactly.
As I said, I'm not opposed to anybody or anything. I'm opposed to oppression. I'm opposed to exploitation.
Right, exactly.
And then being opposed to those means that certain people have to stop speaking for other people and start speaking for our people.
Exactly.
And doing for our people rather than doing for others. She mentioned the election. People start drawing lines and taking sides. Instead of saying, I work with the Black community, I work for the Black community, and that's where my interests are. People say it's racist to think like that. Well, racists have to have power. We don't have no power. So my thing is that we really need to adjust ourselves and our sights and do the things necessary to build up ourselves and our community, and then start talking about working with other people.
Okay. So then Dr. Frazier mentioned that the current mayor did not respond to our Black agenda. So what do you think
I think that he probably did right for his interests because he paid off the people he needed to stand up for him at the time that he was the so-called election was rising up. The person who I thought had the best opportunity was ran out of the race early, and she probably would have been the best candidate for the particular job. But people use their own interests and influences and smidgens of power to get her to step aside, and then they ran someone else who didn't have a chance in the first place. So we really need to look at ourselves internally and do the kind of things we need to do to clean our own house up. Malcolm said clean up.
Clean up.
He didn't say to clean up with a broom. He said clean up with everything necessary by any means necessary to get us prepared for standing up.
Okay. So the question goes to you, Justina. Do you think we need to have a comprehensive Black Agenda work plan, and why? And the fact that the current mayor never responded, so we really don't know how he feels. What do you think?
We absolutely do need a Black Agenda work plan for all people of African descent. It seems that the Black Agenda component, people may shy away from the actual Black Agenda, but these issues are in the community. They're not going anywhere, and they're getting worse. Until we address them in an actual functioning work plan, in a model that cities can replicate, towns can replicate, Black people of African descent can replicate, where they know how to educate, organize, and mobilize themselves. We have the responsibility of creating that work plan and trying to get everyone at the table to help put that work plan together, because we all have a vested interest in our communities. It doesn't make sense to get educated and then move out of the community.
Right.
When you have a vested interest in the community that you are from, you tend to care more about it. So we get back to the education piece. We have to have people in our communities that, once again, educate our children. We need to see, children need to see people who they identify with. So within the work plan, no different than the economic development component that has to be plugged into there, it has to be a complete functioning structure. So I'll give you an example. Attorney Naomi Davis has Blacks in Green, okay? That component of the Green Village Building Network, so that my neighbor won't be hungry because I have a green garden in the backyard, okay? These are the things that we've gotten away from.
Right.
And these are, and I'm just speaking loosely about the structure of the work plan in itself, but clearly every single issue that is at the forefront of the Black Agenda absolutely has to have a structure, an organizational model in place, an outreach, an intake component, everything that a regular program has.
Right.
For every single issue plaguing our communities, we have to have that complete step-by-step structure. When you're here in this situation, this is what you need to do. This is who you need to reach out to. And that's something we have to update on an ongoing basis.
Yes.
Quarterly.
Yes. So I'm hearing the same thing from all of you, and that's kind of why I did the data the way I do. That way we can take it as a community and build something. It doesn't matter who the leadership is, it should be changeable, right? We have a vision for our community, and when I look at where we are today, that's what we're lacking. In the 60s, we had a vision, right, of what we wanted. That was the Civil Rights Act, which we thought at that time was going to give us something, which hasn't really given us much, right? So now we understand, if we have an agenda that we can all focus on, then we can now choose the right leadership to move the agenda forward. But most importantly, listening to what Justina is talking about, educate, organize, and mobilize, then we will actually run that ship. I'm talking about we as community members. And that's where we've been seeing that disconnect. So what are ways, she's kind of touched on this, ways to build awareness in the Black community amongst policymakers and elected officials to hold them more accountable for lack of economic progress in the Black community. The data that has been presented is to give every Black, white, and Asian or Hispanic politician no excuse when a Black community says, this is what we need, the data supports our need, right? So what ways do you think we can build awareness? Because as we've talked about, we need the churches on board, we need the children on board, right? We need
stakeholders.
Exactly. So
All
give me
the
some.
stakeholders have to be involved in the process, and that's what we had been alluding to when we were talking. All of the stakeholders must be involved, and when you miss one component of that stakeholdership, you have a problem. It's a serious problem. And so as we see just back in old times when you had the minstrel programs, where somebody else was playing our role,
Right.
we have to be at the table playing our own roles. We're the ones. But when you're talking about those in leadership, of course we know the leadership is accountable to do what's right and what's righteous. And I believe many of them are trying. I mean, I'm not going to just put a blanket thing and say, no, they're not. We know some of them are, some of them may not be. But as you had said previously, everybody has to, the stakeholdership has to be in place. And in holding the individuals who are in authority accountable, that means that there will be consequences
Right.
when they don't do what we say, because we are the ones who have put them in position. And that's one of, I believe, has been our major drawback as a people. We don't hold our individuals accountable. And you go up to different school districts and things, and you hear about what's happening in Wheating and all of these other places where it's a majority white population. They get results because they hold the people accountable. We, unfortunately, we don't, because we always say, well, we make excuses. And I think everybody up here would agree that it's time out for excuses.
That's right. What do you think, Yusufu?
Well, I just think that we need to change our vision of what we're talking about as leadership. We kept talking about appointing or picking or something. That, to me, is historically exhausted. We don't need to pick no Messiah-like leaders. We need to pick a leader that comes up in our ranks, understands what the stakeholders is and what the stakeholders are, what the community is. We have to grow somebody in those values. There's two styles of leadership that struggles in our community, as I see it. One is individual leader, usually from out of the church or the mosque or the temple, and they see it as God's mission. It might be, but they also there's the other model which says that we are the leadership. We are the ones who decide the direction, we as a community. But we have to step into that step by step, because right now, to impose that model will, have rejection and problematic. So I think we need to really look at what we mean when we say leader nowadays.
That's a good point.
Okay. And Justina,
When we talk about leadership, we do have to go back to the historical aspect of leadership, and we have to look back to the elders who have gone through the process of putting leaders in place to speak on behalf of our community. They have not passed the torch. They are not passing the torch. They are holding on for dear life, and this is why our communities are struggling right now. They don't want to share the knowledge. Unfortunately, they're threatened, and yes, some of them know who they are. May God bless their souls. But at some point, you can't die with the information. You have a responsibility to pass that information on, and our communities need this information.
Exactly.
You know who you are, and I will leave it at that. There's a group of you all. But in passing the leadership, I understand that the youth have to respect the elders, and I get that. I get that 100%. So we get back to the very truth of our rites of passage. We don't have that in place any longer, okay?
Right.
And our youth are in a situation of, I homeschool. Let me be clear. I have an 8-year-old child that I homeschool. Okay, even though I offer programs in the Chicago public school system, because that system is broken. It doesn't work. Right. They don't have a magnet school on the west side of Chicago for minority black children, okay? They don't have a gifted program on the west side of Chicago for minority gifted black children. They rather offer those children medication, okay? So what I'm saying is, before we had the issue of our youth being educated, okay? In this pipeline to prison, through the medication, through all of the issues of them in the community, going to the schools, being written off. How is it that we didn't have these issues of depression and ADHD and all of these things when the elders were at the forefront of leadership?
That's another issue that we're going to get involved with. We're going to talk about education as access to knowledge is one of our issues. So first I want to thank you all for coming on board and being here today. And just to say that we talked about life expectancy, some of the impact. We talked about having community become much more vocal, talking about educating and organizing people, and us being more forceful to our politicians, holding them accountable. And a key thing that Justina talks about is the fact that the elders have not passed the torch. And I am here to testify that she is correct. Okay? Here to witness. Yes. Okay? And that is something, you know, that is really poor in our community, because the reality is they're going to drop dead in their seats, right? And then we're going to have a crisis. And before you look, we're going to have other people representing us because we failed to address this. So we looked at, what we're looking at here is that we have a lack of understanding of what freedom really means and the responsibility that that entails, right? Our community is suffering, our community is suffering, our community is suffering. See, I said it 3 times, because our community is suffering. Life expectancy is like the canary in the coal mine, and it's telling us that something is terribly wrong and that we have to address it. We're looking for people of like minds to come on board, begin to work together in our communities to find and implement solutions, okay? So again, my name is Cecile Johnson. I want to thank Dr. Gale Frazier, Yusufu Moseley, Justina Winfrey for being my guests here today, and for the consistency that you all have had in community, in being a part of the solutions. These people don't just talk, you know, rule number 1, talk. If you don't come with a solution next time, you have nothing to say. These people are making it happen. So if you'd like to reach me, again, I'm Cecile Johnson with African Development Plan. You can reach me at my email, which is African Development Plan, spelled exactly as it sounds, African, A-F-R-I-C-A-N, D-E-V-E-L-O-P-M-E-N-T, plan, P-L-A-N, @gmail.com. And happy to hear from you. Tell us how you can come on board, how you can join us, how you can help us to structure this, how we can get a game plan going, and what role you will play. Don't just call me or write me to complain. What role will you play? If you don't have a role to play but to complain, please don't write me, okay? So let's do it like that. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.